Welcome to If Numbers Could Talk. My name is KEILYN. If Numbers Could Talk is a part of the Thinkering Group. You can find us over at thinkering.space. You can also find at Thinkering Space the Thinkering Talks podcast, the Exofathom podcast, along with the Plank Talks with Joe. When you get a chance, please check out our merchandise. We have merchandise on our website, thinkering.space, as well as merchandise at teespring.com/thinkering-shop. Please visit, grab a t-shirt, grab a mug. We'll appreciate it. And when you do, feel free to let us know that you've decided to become a member of any of our fan clubs. Welcome to If Numbers Could Talk today. Today is a day that we will be just simply recapping one of the Laker greats, one of the basketball greats, an executive great, a player great, a great, just a guy who, although most of us in this time, this era, didn't really get to watch him play, the lore of what he did and the way some of those things were not only told to us, but also watching him general manage, watching what his mind thought of when basketball came up. This will be an episode recapping ELGIN Baylor's career, not so much of his executive career. I'll probably only discuss it maybe 2 or 3 times, really bring it up. However, that is a part of what he brought to the NBA. We are talking about ELGIN Baylor and what he brought to the NBA. That is what today's episode is going to be about. Now, for those who do not know, ELGIN Baylor was a lifetime Laker. He was a Minneapolis Laker and then a Los Angeles Laker. ELGIN Baylor's number was 22, and ELGIN Baylor transitioned on March 22nd, 2021. So his number was 22, and he transitioned on the 22nd day of a month. He also was the Clippers general manager for 22 years. I don't know if that was intentional, but as you see, 22 was kind of a reoccurring number now that we look at it from this stance for us. ELGIN Baylor was drafted 1958, the first pick to the Minneapolis Lakers. He stood as listed, 6'5", 225 pounds, and played small forward. As the first round draft pick of 1958, ELGIN Baylor signed a contract that guaranteed him $20,000 a year, which in 2019 would have been equivalent to $180,000 a year. So ELGIN Baylor, if he were drafted in today's era, would have signed a contract that equated $180,000 a year. Now let's talk about what he accomplished in that career. ELGIN Baylor played 14 years in the NBA. He is a Hall of Famer. ELGIN Baylor is a Hall of Fame player. He was inducted into the NBA Hall of Fame in 1977. In 1977, only 8 years, but let's call it 9 for the moment, because it was 72 to 77. Oh, wait, my math is off, isn't it? 72 to 77 is 5 years. Ooh, wow, 9. What was I looking at? So ELGIN Baylor was elected to the Hall of Fame 5 years after retiring from the NBA. Again, he played 14 years, 1958 to 1972. Now, a couple of facts about ELGIN Baylor before we really get into those numbers. We're always talking about numbers, but numbers are facts, and I like to bring other facts to the table sometimes. In 1962, ELGIN Baylor played 48 games while serving as a member of the U.S. Army Reserve. He only played games on the weekend, which was his free time, or what most people would use to go home and things of that nature. And during that time, Elgin Baylor averaged 38 points, 18 rebounds, and 5 assists in the season, and 38 points, 17 rebounds, and 3 assists in the playoffs. Steals and blocks were not recorded during this era. In the 62-63 season, Elgin Baylor was the first player to finish the season #1 in 4 different categories: points, rebounds, assist, and free throw percentage. He also became the 3rd single game, as a rookie. Let me say this. As a rookie, he became the 3rd single game high score holder with 55 points as a rookie. This is a guy who, again, in 1958, signed a contract that made him $20,000 a year, which in today's era would equate to $180,000 a year. That's your #1 draft pick, ladies and gentlemen, Elgin Baylor. Elgin Baylor is an 11-time All-Star with 1 All-Star MVP. He has not won any championships. However, Elgin Baylor has been to 8 finals. He was the Rookie of the Year. He was elected to 10 first-time All-NBA teams. He is the 4th most. He holds the 4th all-time place of NBA history. So I want to say there's 3 other people tied for 4th, having 10 different nominations to the All-NBA team. Although Elgin Baylor has no rings and has been to the finals 8 times, he has been to the playoffs a total of 12 times. He played a total of 14 seasons and went to the playoffs a total of 12 times. That's impressive. Now, before we get to record highs, let's talk about a single game record. A single game record. In the 1962 finals, remember, he'd been to 8 finals. In the 1962 finals, game 5, Elgin Baylor scored 61 points, which was the single game high for a playoff game. That wasn't broken for 24 years. And that was broken by Michael Jordan, who scored 63 points. Elgin Baylor has the 3rd best all-time points per game average at 27.4 points. And that moves us into our season averages and percentages and totals. Season averages, percentages, and totals for Elgin Baylor. Again, Elgin Baylor has the 3rd best all-time PPG, points per game, 27.4 points per game for Elgin Baylor's career, 13.5 rebounds, 4.3 assists. He shot 43% from the field and 78% from the free throw line. There was no 3-point percentage at the time. There was no 3-pointer at the time. Just let it go, guys. For the people who, what do you mean? Just look it up. So I don't understand how people look at these guys from this era and they don't see like 27 points and 13 rebounds with 4 assists. That's your 3. That's your wing. And he was only 6'5". That's a point guard today. Elgin Baylor played a total of 846 NBA games. He amassed 23,146 points in his NBA career, 11,463 rebounds, with 3,650 assists for Elgin Baylor in his career. I'll go over those one more time. In 846 games, Elgin Baylor had 23,146 points, 11,463 rebounds with 3,650 assists to match. Remember, steals and blocks were not accounted for during this era. That's not a thing that was just readily there. They weren't keeping really great note of it, unfortunately. It would be great to discuss right now, but they weren't doing it. At least I couldn't find it. Help me out. Anybody? Now, before we move on to the playoffs, there was something I found a little interesting. Sometimes I am able to figure out exactly how many games a guy played. And by doing that, tell you what was their win-loss. Sometimes it's really easy to find. Sometimes it's really difficult to find. And sometimes it's simply not there. This was one of those times. And it usually occurs that way with the older players. It's a little harder to find some of their stats, right? So with Elgin Baylor, it wasn't impossible, but it wasn't the easiest thing to find out exactly how many games Elgin Baylor himself won and lost. What I was able to do was figure out how many games the Lakers won and lost between 1958 and 1972. Now, let's remember, this is the only team Elgin Baylor's ever played for. So let's work this out a little bit. Elgin Baylor excuse me, sorry about that. Elgin Baylor, while he has a record of being with the Lakers from 1958 to 1972, the Lakers won during that time period 643 NBA games. 643 NBA games. And they lost 474 NBA games. Lost 474. So if you won 643, lost 474, my opinion, during Elgin Baylor's career, the Lakers had a pretty great run. I wouldn't say from 643 and 474, I wouldn't say that at any point, other than maybe 2 or 3 years, they weren't in the top 5. Maybe, you never really know. It depends on what the other teams were doing. One thing I do know is during this time, the reason Elgin Baylor has no, and this is where my comedy side of that comes from for me. During that time period was the Celtics run. That was the Celtics, Bill Russell dominant era. Dominant era. Bill Russell has 11 titles. Wouldn't really matter who you are if you played in that era and a guy has 11 titles, chances are you will end your career with none. And that's how this played out. So even with all of the talent that the Lakers were able to put together, with the great Elgin Baylor on their roster, they were not able to get any championships during his time. But that is during his time. The Lakers and the Celtics are currently tied 17-17. Boom. Back to Elgin Baylor. Sorry for those who were like, hey, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about Elgin. You're absolutely right, and I apologize. Elgin Baylor in his playoff career averaged 27 points, 12.9 rebounds with 4 assists. Elgin Baylor shot 44% from the field during that period of time. During those games, period of time. See, my mind got stuck in a loop. Elgin Baylor shot 44% from the field during that period of time and 77% from the free throw line during his playoff career. 44% from the field, 77% from the free throw during his playoff career. Elgin Baylor played 134 playoff games. Remember, that is 12 playoff appearances, 8 finals appearances, 134 NBA playoff games. During that time, he scored 3,623 points, grabbed 1,724 rebounds, and dished out 541 assists in his 134 playoff games. One more time for you. Elgin Baylor has played and did play in his career 134 playoff games, 3,623 points he scored, 1,724 rebounds he grabbed, and 541 assists he dished out. Steals and blocks were not recorded during his era. Now, because we're not comparing him to someone else, we get straight to the highs. We already got some of the records. And for those who are not aware, Elgin Baylor's number has been retired. That is the purpose of the number 22. His number has been retired, I want to say, since 1977 when he went to the Hall of Fame. That's when I believe the Lakers retired his number. I could look that up right now on air, but I'll leave that to you guys. And please let me know whether I was right or not. Let me know in the comment section, or you can send an email over to ifnumberscouldtalk@gmail.com. We're always here for the comments and anything you'd like to add or anything you'd like to hear from us. Now, Elgin Baylor's highs, the high scores for Elgin Baylor. It was 1969, the 9th night of February, when Elgin Baylor dished a career high of 16 assists versus the Phoenix Suns. 16 assists versus the Phoenix Suns. Now, this is a guy who only averaged 4 assists for his entire career. 4 assists for his entire career. And on this particular night, he dished out 16 of them. But that's not the most impressive game high. Neither is his 61 points that he scored game 5 versus Bill Russell in the playoffs, in the finals, in fact. That's not his game high, his game score, his high score for points. His high score for points came in 1960 on the 15th night in November. Now, on this night, Elgin Baylor also grabbed 25 rebounds, but that's not what took the page. That's not what took the front page. That's not what everybody remembers about that night, for Elgin Baylor at least. What people remember about Elgin Baylor that night is he scored 71 points versus the New York Knicks. And I believe he did it in Madison Square Garden. I could be wrong on that one. And the reason I could be wrong on that one is it didn't say with this particular game, because I tried to look it up. I couldn't get it to say whether it was Lakers at New York or New York at Lakers. It just kept saying Lakers versus New York. It never switched. It just Lakers versus New York. So I assume it was in the Garden, but then there's a whole lot of other records and stories that we'd have to recant and go over, wouldn't we? You guys know what I'm talking about. All the high scores in the Garden. Who has those records? We know who they are. But Elgin Baylor scored 71 points on November 15th in 1960, while also grabbing 25 rebounds at 6'5". He was a great player, clearly. Now, remember, it was one season he was also in the Army Reserves and still averaged 38 points. Should I double check that for you? Yeah, he averaged 38, 18, and 5 while serving in the Army Reserves. That is insane. That is crazy. Possibly one of the more underrated players, one of those guys who doesn't get anyone talking about him, not even Laker fans. We don't bring him up in any circle, not in Laker circles. Elgin Baylor is one of those guys who made the way. Just go read about him. Go find out about his footwork. Go find out about his above the rim gameplay in the 60s. Above the rim gameplay. Nobody talks about anybody playing above the rim in the 60s, but Elgin Baylor did that. There's some highlights that we can check out, but just go read the stories. Go listen to some of the older guys, or the guys that are older than us, of course. Listen to them tell the stories of watching Elgin play. Find the game tape that you can. A lot of it is on YouTube, but it is amazing to watch a guy in that era do the same things we saw Kobe. Watch Kobe do the same things that a guy in the 60s did. To watch the ability to soar through the air. Before we were talking about Jordan, but we wouldn't know that because there wasn't cameras everywhere. That's not something that I don't think sports was even as popular back then. I'll say it that way. There wasn't as many eyes on the sport, there wasn't so much sports as an entertainment value thing. It was like, hey, either you're paying to go out to this or you're watching it if it comes on your telly. And if not, then nobody's really thinking about it or talking about it. Either you're a fanatic or you're not. I wasn't in those era in that time, but I've heard that over the time we've become a lot more fanatical, hence the word fan. But all in all, Elgin Baylor had an awesome career. There are a lot of great things that you can go and look up and find out about this man. Unfortunately, he did pass away. He did transition on March 22nd, just yesterday, 2021. And his number was 22. He served 22 years as the Clippers general manager. So the number 22, just when I realized that, I had no choice in my mind but to do this episode. I appreciate you guys. I hope his family and everyone who has ever come into contact with him is doing well. All of those who he had something to do with their life or some changes help them out in some way. You know, you never know what a human being did for another human being. So I just wish everyone well who received the news in any way. And take care of yourself. Take care of those you care about. Take care of those you love. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Subscribe on our YouTube. Check us out on Facebook. Visit us at www.thinkering.space. I appreciate you guys. Have a great one. Thanks for tuning in.